Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest version of Tales from Outer Space, where I take an HFY story from somewhere around the internet and read it aloud for your enjoyment. All the relevant links are down below. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube gumph to help this video and channel grow. Anyways, as always, I hope that you enjoy. I would just like to thank the following Tier 5 patrons and channel members for supporting the channel: Datamagnet and Bob the Dragon. Thank you again. And now, on to the story. I used to write horror stories, written by PodgeWrites. I used to write horror stories. Actually, that's not strictly accurate. I wrote horrific, pulpy, unbelievably awful stories which only individuals as depraved as myself would ever take any pleasure from reading, let alone writing. Imagine the greatest sins that you could possibly commit, something so against your own nature that it seemed an abomination from its very inception. Imagine what you could never do to even your most disliked enemies, and you have an inkling of the type of filth I wrote. My work has been banned on every world where they go in for banning books, and I've been politely advised by certain government bodies to avoid publishing my work on several planets that don't. So imagine my surprise when an actual government representative from the Office of Extra Species Affairs, no less, arrived at my doorstep with a request. In no uncertain terms, he asked me to come up with the most horrific alternate history for our planet that I possibly could. Something so sublimely awful that would give hardened criminals nightmares. The only condition was that, at the end, it had to square up with more or less how our civilization has panned out in the modern day. Well, that just seemed fine by me. I asked him how believable it had to be. He actually blanched at that, though I didn't know why at the time, and informed me it didn't need to be believable at all. In fact, the more outlandish and seemingly impossible it was, the better. Then he offered me a very sizable paycheck, told me where I could send the script, and left. Well, who was I to turn down such an interesting request? Or the money, for that matter. I powered up my slate and started to write. I really let loose, even throwing in a few scenes that would give me nightmares, at least at the time. A few weeks later, I had the first draft and touched upon very much every major world event that I could recall from the history lessons, but with the darkest imaginable twists, turns, and horrors. I submitted the piece, and it was rejected within the day. Too tame, I was told. Not enough horror. Not enough mindless violence. Well, at this point, I started to take things seriously. This was practically an affront to my professional integrity, after all. I took back the script, reworked it considerably, and resubmitted. Again, I came back with major revisions. The right direction, they said, but still too mild. The characters were too comprehensible, the violence too sedate, the overall themes too positive. I couldn't believe it at first. To my mind, this was some of my most outrageous work. But I stuck with it. Weeks passed, until at last I woke one late afternoon to the same government rep at my door. I still wasn't getting it, apparently. He wanted to show me something that would open my eyes to what exactly it was I should be aiming for. He brought me to what amounted to a bunker annex of a high-security station somewhere I'm not allowed to say. We went through a myriad of checks, scans, and more. They mostly seemed concerned that I might be carrying any kind of recording device, or in any way of copying or transmitting data. Satisfied that I wasn't, they showed me into a room with a single book sitting on a table, surrounded by more security than I'd seen in some banks. They gave me an empty bucket and a jug of water, and left. Less than 10 minutes later, I found out what the bucket was for. An hour later, I'd found out at least 2 more uses for it. They eventually pulled me out, raving and sick in the midst of a panic attack. They were impressed. Apparently, I'd read more of the damn thing in one sitting than most individuals could stand to know of it at all. They gave me some time to clean up, but even then, I knew what I'd read would stay with me for the rest of my life. It was made none the better for being fiction. Just knowing a mind out there could conceive of such madness was enough. When I was ready, they took me to another room. My handler, the guy from the Office of Extra Species Affairs, sat down opposite me and began to talk. He started talking about a new species they'd discovered and explained that they were responsible for the book. Well, said I, that species has a pretty fecked up imagination. Maybe leave them right where they are, no? That wasn't an option, he explained. They hadn't been contacted yet, but had recently discovered the Quentin particle and thus would likely figure out FTL within the generation. Well then, I said, don't let them publish any more books. There I was, a victim of censorship myself, promoting the same for a fellow author. But to be honest, I was having a hard time considering whoever vomited up that garbage as a colleague. It was the most horrendous thing I'd ever read. Deaths in the millions, billions even. Nuclear energy turned into bombs, used inside atmospheres, unpopulated cities. The book described a species that invented cars before they invented computers that could safely drive them. Hell, they'd invented air travel before they invented parachutes. I'd had to check the appendage of the damn thing to find out what concepts of assault, family assault, spree killing, and genocide even were. My gods, genocide. I was an amateur. This author was in a different league entirely. And he was welcome to stay there. Why the hell did they even get me to try and match this crap in the first place, I asked. What was this? Some kind of cross-species literary pissing contest. That's when he dropped it on me. The book. It wasn't a work of fiction. Despite incredulity by every being who had ever studied it, the damn thing was in fact an actual history of a real species. And this race, this fecking monsters, were about to break out of their own system and start wandering around actual, habitable, civilized star systems. The whole thing, the frankly ludicrous notion of getting me to write a horrific alternative to our own history, was part of some grand first contact scheme the Conclave had cooked up. They had me write it because they were going to present it to the species as an actual history, in the hopes that they believed it and think that they were dealing with a species capable of the same kind of crap that they were. All of this because, the thinking went, if they knew what comparative wimps we were, we'd be next. The next fecking genocide they'd attempt. Actually, they already had a word for it. Xenocide. The wiping out of alien races. These feckers hadn't even met an alien race yet, and they already had a vocabulary in place for killing every last one of us. Crap like that really put the wrongs of our kind into perspective. What was one infamous lunatic accidentally pushing 2 people to their deaths while fleeing an incorrect change incident in the light of the existence of something like nerve gas? This comparison in particular was fresh in my mind, as the centennial memorial service for the Vonnegut massacre had just been the month before. Anyway, I bugged right out of that bunker. No way I was going to be involved in that crazy plan, and no way would it work in the first place. A species like that would smell the fake a mile off, then probably eat whoever presented it to them. I can't believe I just wrote that. A line about one sentient eating another. I could have gotten a whole book out of that, back when I was writing. Do you know they have a word for eating a member of their own species? Cannibalism. It was apparently common enough that they needed a word for it. I'm sorry, but if you didn't want to know that, you should have quit a paragraph back. So, like I said, I used to write horror. After that incident, I packed up everything I had, which was not a lot, and hightailed it for the far side of the galaxy. The way I see it, it's only a matter of time until these feckers get out. And I don't see any plan involving telling them that we can measure up to the sheer vulgar insanity panning out. So I fled. And you should too. Oh, and one last piece of advice. If anyone ever hands you a book called A Brief History of Earth, don't read it. You'll spend the rest of your life checking around every corner for humans. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.